Good evening. Hello, Facebook friends, revolutionaries, citizens of America and the planet. It's good to be back with you again on Facebook Live after a couple of weeks away. I've been on tour in California at many of the state colleges and community events, and then had the great pleasure to meet up with Global Greens in Belgium, in the Netherlands, where they are just surging forward, especially in the Netherlands, but all across the European Greens for the most part. The Greens are really emerging as the resistance, as the alternative and the counterweight against fascism, against right-wing extremism. The Green parties are going strong. In fact, in the Netherlands, they quadrupled their representatives in Parliament. It was very exciting to be there. They are in the process of negotiating with the other parties and may in fact be a part of the government. They're led by a 30-year-old Green, the Young Greens in Netherlands, the left Greens, I might add, who are just leading the charge for bringing us together as a movement for economic justice and social justice, as well as climate justice and peace. So very exciting to see the Greens standing up. And let me ask you to please like this conversation and to share it so we can get the word out, and just let people know that we're here and we're going strong, and to spread the good news. So if you can like this and share this, we can help get the word out. So I've been with the Global Greens, I'll come back to that in a minute, and doing organizing here at home, especially around May Day. And we'll be talking about that a little bit tonight too. And I want to encourage you to share your thoughts, your struggles. How are you coping with these unprecedented times of great peril and great possibility? This was really the major theme in the conversations that I was having with the Global Greens. And that included not only people from the Netherlands and from Belgium, but also Global Greens were meeting in Liverpool, England. So I had a chance to meet up with Indonesian Greens, who are leading the charge to save their rainforests in particular, to fight against extraction, against mining. I spent time with the Korean Greens, who are leading the charge against the military crisis, the crisis of militarism, as the U.S. has pivoted our military-industrial complex to Southeast Asia. And in fact, you may know that we have just sent, Donald Trump that is, I don't mean we, but the White House has just sent a battleship, a major aircraft carrier, along with destroyers, to the coastal waters of Korea, as the U.S. has moved in missile defense, which is basically very destabilizing and has been extremely provocative, not only to North Korea but also to China. We can talk about that more later in our discussion if you would like to go there, but it was really exciting to meet up with the Green Party of Korea, who really gets that the first thing we need, in fact, is a peace treaty to end the Korean War, because it's no wonder North Korea is on the defensive with these military exercises on its border, with the U.S. establishing a huge naval base at Jeju Island, which has been extremely destructive to the environment there, a very fragile set of ecosystems there for people who've been following it. So, suffice it to say, it was just great to hear from the people who are actually living there, who really want to be able to make peace in the Korean Peninsula and make it a nuclear-free peninsula as part of a nuclear-free world. You may also have heard while this was going on, while we were actually meeting with the Korean Greens, the United Nations has launched a new treaty to make, basically to ban nuclear weapons and to make them illegal, as they should be, because they are incompatible with life. And we are, on the verge of two nuclear confrontations. One is on the border of Russia, potentially in Syria as well, and also in the Korean Peninsula. So it's very exciting that the non-nuclear nations have gotten together and they've said, we're tired of waiting for you guys. The nuclear nations were supposed to be leading the way to disarmament. That's part of the agreement among the nuclear nations, and the agreement that new nations would not develop nuclear weapons. It was supposed to be because the guys with the nukes were going to be getting rid of them. But we're going in the opposite direction now. We are intensifying the nuclear arms race. In fact, as you may recall, the Obama White House has created a program for $1 trillion in new investments in a new generation of nuclear weapons, when we should be getting rid of them. And what should we do with that $1 trillion? Well, you know as well as I do, we should be putting that $1 trillion not into a new generation of nukes, but a new generation of people, liberating young people from predatory student loan debt and liberating them to lead the way forward in our economy. So it was great to meet with the Korean Greens, the Indonesian Greens, the Russian Greens, in fact, who talked about their incredible struggle to get on the ballot, to get into elections when, guess what, their mainstream media won't cover them, and they have enormous petition requirements put on them in order to get into the elections. It kind of rings some bells about the way things work here as well. Maybe ours is more a corporate arrangement as opposed to an explicit government making these decisions. The lines are very blurry, put it that way, and we're fighting very similar battles. So it was great to meet up with the Russian Greens. Also the Green Party of Rwanda is the sole opposition party, and the courage of the Green Party presidential candidate from Rwanda is incredible. My hope is to have him on this program in the not too distant future. He's in Sweden right now. His vice presidential candidate was killed, actually was decapitated, in the oppression, the incredible political oppression that takes place in that dictatorship in Rwanda. So, the Greens are really standing up with incredible conviction and courage all over the world, but especially in Rwanda, I have to say their courage is absolutely unparalleled. So it was very exciting to meet with them. And here at home, I want to just give a shout out for the upcoming May Day strike. In some communities, it's a strike. In some places, it's a rally. But this is a strike or a rally or a demonstration on behalf of workers' rights, which is the traditional origins of May Day, which began in the late 19th century. It was how we achieved the 8-hour workday. Before then, we were working, 12-hour and 16-hour days in horrific working conditions. Thousands of workers were dying in a year in these outrageous conditions. So this was really the origins of the labor movement. And May 1st was where hundreds of thousands of workers actually went out on strike. On May 1st, I believe it was 1888, if I'm not mistaken. They spent about 2 years organizing for it before it happened. So they went out in huge numbers, and basically, society came to a standstill. There was violence on the part of police. Protesters were killed, and then somebody threw a bomb. and to this day it's not known who. And there was incredible political repression, sort of the first McCarthyism followed that. Anyhow, it's a fascinating history. The origins, it was 1886, I'm being reminded here, that the Haymarket demonstration actually took place. That struggle goes on for workers' rights, for safety in the workplace, and for our basic economic rights. So starting in 2006, I believe it was, the immigrant community began to really revive May Day and to draw the connection between the struggles of working people and the struggles of immigrants, especially the undocumented community whose labor is so abused and underpaid and subjected to such grave health and safety risks. The immigrant community came out on May Day to declare it a day without immigrants. And because of the force of that movement, there were millions of people who came out for May Day as an immigrant rights day. Because of that, a very oppressive bill in Congress was defeated thanks to that incredible mobilization on May Day. So the connection continues to go strong between the rights of workers and the rights of immigrants. So on this May Day, we're actually encouraging people to come out, be a part of this mobilization for May Day and for workers and for immigrants. And as Greens, in particular, what we're doing is drawing the connections, connecting the dots between immigrant rights and the root causes of the refugee crisis. What does that mean? It means militarism and all the wars that have made 65 million people refugees in the past year, according to the United Nations. So it's war, it is economic oppression and exploitation, and it's also climate change, which is turning thousands of people into refugees and could potentially become millions of people becoming climate refugees if we continue at the rate we're going. So the bottom line here is go out and support workers and immigrants on May Day. But think about, connecting the dots to the climate movement, to the anti-war movement, and to the broader economic justice movement. Think about hosting a meetup for movement unity. That's what we'll be doing in the Boston area. The Green Rainbow Party in Massachusetts, along with many grassroots groups, including also the Liberty Tree Foundation for the Democratic Revolution. We are working to expand the coalition around May Day and ensure that it's not just a one-day event, but that this is something we are doing for the long haul, that we are building real movement unity here, so that it's unity for people, planet, and peace over profit. So that's one aspect of this, is let's make this coalition as big as the crisis barreling down on us. The crisis of fascism, of war, of climate change, nuclear arms race, etc. Let's build that coalition that we need in order to move forward. And the second piece of this is let's develop a tool with impact sufficient to this crisis that we're facing. So that means instead of just coming out for a day, that we're looking at developing the capacity for a general strike or for direct action in other forms. But we're looking for a tool on the ground with real impact, not simply a demonstration or a rally that's here today and gone tomorrow. But we're looking at something with real impact that brings the wheels of destruction to a grinding halt, the wheels of economic and ecological destruction. We need to be able to stop them and to say that we, the people of the world, are standing together for people, planet, and peace over profit, and we are going to change the system. Like the workers did back in May Day in 1886, we need to develop that capacity now, and to do it in a way that brings us together across social boundaries, across the different movements, so we're not divided and conquered, but also that brings us together across national borders, because we are all facing this crisis of neoliberalism and neo-fascism. So let's work together and build the coalition as big as it needs to be, and let's learn how to really flex our muscles out there in the street in a way that cannot be bypassed and written off. So think about creating a May Day meetup for movement unity and beginning this discussion in your community. Stay tuned to this Facebook page to watch for more information about strikes, movements, and solidarity on May Day. So thank you so much for listening. But you know, this is what I found just kept coming up in conversation after conversation, whether it was out in California or whether it was in Liverpool, and whether I was talking to people from Indonesia or from Africa or from New York. This is really kind of on everybody's minds now. We're in crisis mode here, and what can we do that begins to rise to the degree of seriousness and impact that measures up to the crisis that we're facing. So over and over again, this idea of developing the capacity for the general strike or for the coordinated series of synchronized direct actions on a global basis, developing this idea of a grassroots coalition as big as the crisis barreling down on us, building local alliances for global action to change our direction going forward. So stay tuned, and I look forward to continuing this conversation with you. So let me turn to your comments and questions. And I want to give a big thank you, shout out to Mel Figueroa, who is helping out there, monitoring this Facebook page. And again, everybody, please give a shout out to your friends by liking this page and sharing this page so we can get the word out to so many people out there who are hurting to know that there are millions of us out there. We really are the 99%. And people are really hurting for action that brings us together. So by sharing this page and sharing this conversation, we can help provide that support so we can all go forward knowing that we are part of a big movement. So where's the Politicat? Abdul Jones II says, where's the Politicat? I'm not sure where he is. We have some house guests staying here. So I think he's hiding, but you never know. He may turn out any moment. Morgana LaFay says, the warmongering scares me. So does the pro-globalization movement that the media pushes. Yes, Morgana, I really agree with you. You know, and we just saw Donald Trump fire off some 60 or so Patriot missiles at over $1 million a pop, you know, in order to destroy an airfield without, shall we say, proven cause. And besides, even if Syria was illegally using chemical weapons, that doesn't then make it okay to just go ahead and bomb them. That means they then go to the criminal court, or it means that the United Nations then takes action. If we have all these lone actors who are in the business of bombing countries who violate treaties, well, you know what? People would be bombing us for violating treaties as well, including violating the agreement with the UN that you don't bomb other countries unless your own national security is imminently under threat. Unless you've been invaded or you're on the verge of being invaded, it's not okay to invade other countries or to go and bomb them. So two wrongs don't make a right, as many of our mothers used to tell us, and many may still do that. So yes, fortunately, public opinion seems to be clear that people don't want more of this, and they don't want to get embroiled in a war in Syria. We're already involved in that war in Syria. And again, what we should be doing now is creating a weapons embargo. And I was actually glad to see Secretary of State Tillerson talking with the Russians today so that we don't go into a complete crisis with the Russians. We could tip into nuclear war here, with the blink of an eye. So it's really important to move forward towards a real and lasting peace in the Middle East. And making Syria more complicated and chaotic is not the way forward. A weapons embargo and a freeze on the bank accounts of countries that continue to support terrorist enterprises, that's how we move forward to peace in the Middle East. Datsa Good says, Jill, can you address hashtag political strategy versus hashtag intellectual discussion and solid hashtag reasoning and hashtag awakening for the way forward? Please, in the context of turning a blind eye to Bernie's promotion of weapon sales to installed dictatorships. Let me just say briefly that selling weapons is not the answer here. And, the U.S. has been selling weapons to all sides in this conflict. Our NATO partners in Europe have also been selling weapons. Russia is selling weapons. Iran is selling weapons. I think we need a whole different approach to the weapons industry. We should not be making war for profit. And we should not be in the business of selling weapons for profit. I think that's the way forward. That includes in particular Saudi Arabia. It includes Israel and many other countries. We should not be in the business of selling weapons to them, period. Thank you, Dutza. Lance Smith says, I have grave concerns about World War III, which seems imminent. What is the hope for civilization? And thank you, Lance. I think the hope for civilization, like the hope for, stopping the wars, preventing nuclear conflict, there are answers. There are real solutions here. And for one thing, the United Nations ban on nuclear weapons is very powerful, because the other countries of the world can move this forward, and we can pressure our governments as the people of the world that understands that we do not have a future in a nuclear arms race here. The nuclear clock has been advanced to like 2 minutes to midnight. Or maybe it's 2.5 minutes, but it's it's dangerously close to midnight. So really important for us to stand up. We can stop nuclear madness. We can also stop climate madness. And these dots connect. They connect through a policy that puts our dollars into a Green New Deal here at home and promoting a Green New Deal abroad, so that instead of us putting half of our tax dollars and half of our discretionary budget into the bloated and dangerous military, which is not making us safer, instead we're putting those dollars into real security at home. And guess what? That makes the wars for oil obsolete. When we're not competing for the oil, then we don't need the ginned up military. Instead, we can then put those dollars into ensuring that we don't need that fossil fuel pipeline. Instead, we have good jobs, clean jobs, healthy jobs here at home. And we transition to 100% clean renewable energy, and we need to do that more than ever now. The news came out recently that the permafrost is melting. This is one of those major tipping points that will greatly accelerate climate change. We just had 80-degree weather here. What's the temperature where you are? Are you guys seeing, crazy weather? We had 80 degrees in April here in Boston, and that's really unheard of. It's a new record. Last year set the all-time global record for warmest year ever. We're seeing the Great Barrier Reef dying. 2/3 of the Great Barrier Reef is now basically on its way out. These are not hits we can sustain for very much longer. So it's really important for us now to stand up together and move forward on the Green New Deal. This also means moving forward as the Green Party, because power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has and it never will, as Frederick Douglass famously said. So we've got to be that demand. We've got to be that power. We have some great candidates that are continuing to push forward. And quickly report back, Kenneth Mejia did terrific. He actually beat the Republican in the primary system. In California, it's a top 2 primary, so everybody runs together. But it was so exciting to see a Green coming in as the second party. There were a couple of machine Democrats that had big money that beat him out. But stay tuned, because there's another election coming up in his district, and he's built a wonderful team on the ground working with the Burners who've gone green in Los Angeles. In Los Angeles, the second party now officially is Greens. If you look at the results of this multi-party congressional race. So very exciting. And Sherry Honkala's race is basically in court right now, because the race was a poster child of Democratic Party machine corruption. So we will hopefully see a re-election there. Stay tuned, but every form of so-called irregularity in the election happened, including outright voter intimidation and manipulation by the Democratic machine that was manning the polls and strong-arming people into a manipulated Democratic Party vote. And they are now in court. The Republicans and the Greens together have taken the Democratic Party to court. So stay tuned. That is a very exciting election. Lance, let's see, Audra Walton says, I'd love to know what is on your reading list now and what is on your bookshelf. What should we be reading now? Boy, that's a great question, Audra. Truth to tell, I am a news junkie, and I'm a news junkie and a science junkie. So my reading list is... it's Democracy Now!, it's the Real News Network, it is The Intercept, it is Consortium News. It's a variety of independent news sources that actually give you the backstory on stuff. I'll be posting actually some of the really compelling articles that I would love to share with you that I think really open up a sense of political possibility right now. The other thing that I do in my free time when I have it is I'm addicted to PubMed, which is the National Institute of Medicine, where anybody can read the abstracts of basically all medical publications. And I'm keeping up on some very interesting developments in cancer and in inflammatory diseases. So more on that another time if you're interested. I can get into the weeds rather quickly on that stuff, and I don't want to lose you. So Jeanette Leonard Fridley says, at least you stood up to the election fraud like the other politicians should have. Thank you so much, Jeanette. And we're still standing up. The recount, by the way, still is going strong. We're in court in Pennsylvania and probably soon to be in court in Wisconsin, too. So we'll update you on that on another Facebook session. And Danny Fitro says, thank you, Jill, for continuing to work for the people and peace. And I'm just going to make a little request. When you post your comments or your questions, let us know where you're from, because it's nice to give a shout out to where people are tuning in from. And Kirsten McGirvin Perilli says, why is peace harder than war? I think Personally, I think that has to do with the money that runs our political machines right now. You know, we're seeing such gridlock between Democrats and Republicans. Why does that happen? In my view, it happens because those parties don't represent people. They represent their corporate sponsors who have particular interests. They're not interested in advancing the broad public interest. I think we need a politics which is of, by, and for the people. Politics that has a heart and a soul. That is the glue that keeps us together as a democracy. So, you know, that's why we have to stand up and fight for green politics, which is people politics. I think that's where we get together, and that's where we bring our humanity in order to lead the way forward. You know, reject the lesser evil, fight for the greater good. The greater good can go a long way to help us move forward. So Andy Howard says, peace and power from the Maine Greens. So thank you, Andy. I hope to actually I am planning to be at the state party convention coming up for the Green Party. And we'll post that as well on our Facebook page. So any Greens who are in the vicinity in Maine, come on out and let's get together and let's move forward. Maine just passed ranked choice voting. Thanks in significant measure to the Greens who've been pushing this. And as you may know, ranked choice voting lets you rank your choices instead of, you know, just voting for one candidate and letting the chips fall where they may. Ranked choice voting ensures that if your first choice loses, your vote will be reassigned to your second choice. So you never throw away your vote. You never worry about unintended consequences of your vote. It's a voting system that liberates our values to lead the way forward. Democracy is not just a question of who do we hate the most or who do we fear the most and coming out to vote against them, you know. And most of Donald Trump's voters were actually voting against Hillary Clinton. So what's wrong with this picture? That's not what democracy looks like. But in Maine, they are leading the way forward with what democracy does look like with ranked choice voting. And we should be moving that forward in every state so that we truly have a liberated vote. Joseph Dunphy says, what are your thoughts on Repubs stalling on healthcare legislation? You know, in a way, I think it's good because the healthcare legislation that they were trying to advance was all about their corporate sponsors. What we need is healthcare legislation for the people. And what people over and over again say in poll after poll is that we want healthcare as a human right. We need an improved Medicare for all system. Everybody in, nobody out. You're covered head to toe, cradle to grave, your pharmaceuticals, your mental health, your reproductive health, your eyeglasses, your hearing aid, whatever it is you need, it is covered, and it doesn't cost us any more. It just means we put healthcare dollars into healthcare, not into profiteering, not into paper pushing, red tape, and bureaucracy, which is what our current system is. About 25% of our healthcare dollars now are being siphoned off into basically administrative overhead. Not with an improved Medicare for all system. That's truly what we need to be pushing forward on right now. Let's see. Shirley Fernandez says, can we have Facebook pages for all other Green parties around the world so we can follow each other? That is a wonderful idea, and we could certainly start to post some of them. So we will make a point of doing that. Joseph Darmany says, the Democrats are priming themselves up to lose again. Never standing for anything but PR agents for war companies. Well, this is true. We need a progressive party. Green is the way. Thank you, Joseph. Well said. And that really is a critical issue right now. Sheila Turple says, Jill, why are you not helping to stop the incredible, let's see, I just lost that. Here it is. Okay. Stop the incredible increase in the building of pipelines everywhere. Yes, thank you, Sheila, for bringing that up. And we are indeed fighting these fights. In fact, the good news is that we have just beaten back another pipeline in New York State, which would have been a big conduit for very polluting fossil fuels. So this is yet another victory thanks to the activists in New York State who have also put a ban on fracking, but they've now beaten back another pipeline. This is after their victory last year on the Constitution pipeline, which was also stopped. So we are having some victories, but we have lots more work to do, and I want to give a special shout out to Eric Rydberg, who is helping to lead the fight on the Klamath River in California. So if you go to hashtag No Klamath LNG, that's KLAMATH LNG, No Klamath LNG, that river is likewise being threatened, much like DAPL. So indeed, we have big fights to keep fighting on all of these pipelines. We should not actually, in truth, the climate cannot tolerate a single additional pipeline. We should be in the business right now of dismantling pipelines and creating the jobs that we really need, which are good for workers and which don't put them at risk for explosions, meltdowns, truck crashes, and cancers, which workers in the fossil fuel industry are extremely vulnerable to. So there's a way forward that's good for all of us. So Kelly Elaine says, join Bernie, rev up the revolution together. Stay on him to go green. He's well known now and doesn't need the Dems for exposure. That's a really good point, Kelly. But unfortunately, he's on tour, I understand right now, with the DNC chair, Tom Perez, who is very much part of the establishment and cheerleading for the same old party favorites. But, you know, Bernie sparked a movement. That movement lives on. As Bernie himself said, it's a movement and not a man. So I really encourage people to not close your eyes to the real world experience around us. Many people were hanging in on Bernie's campaign because that was going to show that the Democratic Party had hope left. But what happened? You know, Bernie got stabbed in the back. So people hung on hoping that the DNC was going to reform. But what happened? You know, the DNC decided not to reform, and it rejected Bernie's candidate, Keith Ellison. It also rejected a ban on corporate contributions. So fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Fool me 100 times, really shame on me. So I really encourage people to think big, think independent, and get to work and go green. When we start winning more elections, because we're winning at the local level, but we need to win also now at the legislative level, and we need to win more prominent positions. As we begin to do that, we will see people come on the bandwagon. But what we're looking at right now is, this question of who's going to be leaders and who's going to be followers. So I just want to congratulate everybody who's doing the hard work right now of creating a new movement and not going over the cliff with the same old movement that just keeps driving us into the ground. We're out of time, folks, on the climate. We're out of time on student debt. We're out of time on the nuclear arms race. But this is the time right now to stand up like our lives depend on it and fight for the system change that we need, and we need it now. And I'd say, like Alice Walker says, biggest way people give up power is by not knowing we have it to start with. We've got the power. It's time to use it like we did during the era of Richard Nixon, one of the biggest tyrants and corrupt presidents in our history prior to now. We brought the troops home. We created the EPA, the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act. We did all of that. We got women's right to choose from a very conservative Supreme Court because we were mobilized and we were out in the street. And that's what we need to be doing again. And I encourage you to get out for May Day. Get out and support workers and immigrant rights and build that coalition out to address the root causes of these crises, and bring us together across the spectrum of justice for people, planet, and peace over profit. Let's work together and let's develop that tool for real traction on the ground. We are about out of time, so I just want to, I'll take one or two last questions here. And I'm going to take one last question from Jacob Neff, who's saying, what is the biggest obstacle, in your opinion, to electoral success for the Greens? And what can we do about it? And Jeff wrote in from Lake County Greens in Round Lake Beach, Illinois. Excuse me. So thank you, Jeff. There are many obstacles that the political establishment tries to throw in our way, but at the end of the day, I think the biggest obstacle is their propaganda, and letting their propaganda stop us. We do have the power. It's all about our standing up and organizing. And that means working with your local Green Party, supporting your local candidate, and ensuring that that candidate wins office and actually gets into office. I think we are at a moment of unprecedented peril and unprecedented possibility. And people are clamoring for that change that we, the Greens, have been leading the way on for decades. We've been ahead of the curve, and the curve has caught up to us. So this is the time for us to double down, to organize, to build out the party, and to take back our future and the potential for an America and a world that works for all of us. The power to create that world, as always, is in our hands. In fact, more than ever, it's in our hands. So thank you all so much for being a part of this. Please like this conversation and share it. Let's get the good word out. And I look forward to seeing you next week. Remember, good news is green news. See you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.